Well, we first programmed the first item of program that we did and that we fixed was the Rite of Spring by Stravinsky, because it involves a lot of musicians, and so the college could really put a lot of students in this final concert of the year, and that's obviously a seminal piece of 20th century music. But also, I think it's quite a cool piece, and I think it's a piece that any audience, and also a young audience and an audience that's rather into rock or pop music, because of its rhythmic drive and a spectacular instrumentation, will like. And we were thinking about an opening piece, and I'd always wanted to conduct this piece by Johnny Greenwood, called Popcorn Superhead Receiver, which Johnny Greenwood is obviously famous indie musician, the guitarist of Radiohead, wrote about 5 years ago. Really exciting piece for a large string orchestra. And I suggested that to the college and say, look, if we're doing, this is a concert from young people, why don't we look at also making a concert for young people? And therefore I suggested this Johnny Greenwood piece, and I think it goes extremely well with the Stravinsky and the idea of the Stravinsky, and it picks up moments of 20th century music techniques from other composers, but it's still a very original piece. And they listened to it and really liked it and said, okay, let's do this. And then I said, okay, well, let's go even a step further. If we're starting to enter the territory of not just classical audiences and classical music, let's actually do a late night, let's do a third part of the concert, a late night bit and set, and get a musician that works in both worlds, or even a musician that you can't quite define. Is he a classical musician or a classically trained composer who writes music that's loved by a pop audience and by a very, very young audience, and therefore Olaf just seemed exactly the right person for this idea. And we asked him, and he was available, and it just fitted in perfectly with his thinking and his ideas, with having just released his new album, which seemed to just lend itself for projecting it on a larger orchestral canvas. So he decided to actually just arrange the whole of the album for orchestra, and that's what he did. His music starts always on an acoustic instrument. He composes from the piano, and he plays his music on the piano, and then it uses strings. It uses a string quartet, which is absolutely the most classical setup you could, and conventional classical setup you could get. But the music isn't classical in the sense of a classical construction of development and exposition, all these sort of things. But they're more like, they're songs. He calls them songs, so they're tracks of a length that are about the length of a pop song or a pop track. So formally, it's more like pop music, and it uses fairly simple, if extremely beautiful, harmonies. And I guess the classical contemporary scene would have a problem with that, because they would say, well, it's not really classical music, and it's tonal and it's quite simple, and it's minimal in a sense. But then you get into this area where obviously for example, minimal music is regarded as classical contemporary music in a way, and I would say his music isn't minimal in the sense of the stereotype word. Minimal music is just minimal in its means, how he makes things happen. I would rather compare him to a sort of 21st century Erik Satie, who wrote these piano miniatures, which are quite repetitive and use a similar harmonic language. But of course, Olafur goes further with that by, first of all, it's sort of becoming more romantic again. That's quite interesting. So it has this miniature-like, quite simple samplature form, but it's at its heart, it's very romantic music, I find. Plus, at the same time, he uses a lot of modern technologies. He uses electronics and very ambient beats in a, I find, very subtle way. So you get a classically sounding string quartet, and suddenly you got this ambient electronics coming in, and it makes it sound like ambient music. And then you have quite a sort of trippy, trip-hoppy beat coming in, which again, you know, lets a song make, you know, a metamorphosis into something completely different and carries it into a different world. So even within one song, you're not quite sure where you're going, and I think that's the special quality of his music. I guess he's got an audience now that loves him, and that's going to grow up with him, and who knows which direction he's going to go in. I'm sure that his growing audience is going to follow him, and he may win the more conventional classical audience over for him too. I'm sure that he's on the right way. I would say that the classical contemporary music scene is quite a closed circle, and that's a shame, I think. But the problem is they have quite they have a problem with music that's just trying to be beautiful and use language that may have been used before, but it's used in this context in a different way, I think. And then you get very often you get a very aggressive reaction by these people against this music, and they think, you know, it's not worth the money and the effort. And I've experienced that even with friends of mine who I thought were open with, you know, like pop music as well as classical music. But maybe they're just uncomfortable with this because they can't quite, you know, categorize it, which draw it should go into, and therefore it makes them feel uncomfortable, I think.